Good morning, YouTube family. Oh, out here early on this Sunday morning, Memorial Day weekend. As you can see behind me, it's a very foggy morning out here this morning. Had a lot of things I needed to get done this weekend. We ended up spending 8 hours yesterday helping the neighbor mill a white pine that he had fall a year ago, that we sawed up for him a year ago, and it's been kind of just sitting there waiting, kind of letting the sap dry out of it. It was insane, and we sawed a large portion of it into large live edge pine mantles that we're going to sell. So that was pretty neat, and it's just so cool milling that lumber and seeing what each cut reveals every single time it goes through. Anyway, before I get into this, I want to say, it is Memorial Day weekend. It is a holiday weekend, but let's first and foremost, remember what this holiday stands for. I mean, it's for those who made the ultimate sacrifice to protect this country, and the first responders as well, who rush into danger and dangerous situations for the rest of us. And they made the ultimate sacrifice. They lost their lives doing their jobs and giving their all for the rest of us. So that's what this holiday is about. And a lot of people I know just think of it as a 3-day weekend. It's a chance to go to the lake. It's a chance to have ball tournaments. It's whatever. But it's always important to remember what the holiday is, what it represents, what it stands for. But anyway, this morning it's beet day. My beets are ready to be harvested, and I'll give you a quick rundown here in a minute when I get over here and get the camera on the tripod of how I planted them this year. Very different, never done it this way before, not sure how it's going to turn out, but they're ready to be harvested, and I'm just going to give you a rundown on that. So as I'm going to do that, I ask that if you haven't yet, you go in and you hit that like and subscribe button. I really appreciate any feedback you can give me. Something that you may want me to see, something that we haven't done on the channel before. If there's something you don't like, let me know. Doesn't mean I'm going to change it. I mean, it's my channel after all. But because this channel represents our rural farm, self-sufficient homesteading, if you want to call it, lifestyle. And that includes gardening. That includes just property management, property maintenance, hunting, trapping. There's some fishing stuff, activities. There's all kinds of stuff we do on here, and our food comes from all of that. So sorry, not sorry if some of that doesn't jive with you, but that's just the way it is. Anyway, I'm gonna roll in here and I'll show you these beets, how we planted them, and I'm gonna harvest them real quickly, hopefully quickly before this sun pops out. Okay, what you see behind me here is this is one of our box beds here at our house. As I said in videos last year, we've got several gardens here on the farm. Most all the gardens that we have are down at lower elevation, down in, I'll call it somewhat better soil. I don't know that it's necessarily better up here on the top. It's very rocky. The first 4 or 5 inches of soil is very rich topsoil, but then when you get below there, you get into really large rocks. So we have most of our gardens down in the bottom where there's not as many rocks, where we can work the soil a lot easier with our equipment. But up here on top, I've got several of these box beds that I use primarily for my spring garden. So my spinach, my lettuce, my beets, my bulb onions, all that sort of stuff. So I did an onion video earlier in the year. Let me move this tree. This is a sawtooth oak I'm germinating from an acorn. Let me move that out of the way. So earlier in the year, I did a video on us planting our storage onions. And as you saw in that video, I made a series of hills, and then in between those hills was a little depression, a little valley. In years past, that's all I did in the beds, was I put those onions in, and I used those valleys to do all the watering of the onions. Well, this year, what I did was I actually planted other leafy greens, basically, down those valleys. And so I had my lettuces, kale, spinach, and then these beets all down in those valley sections. In this soil, what I did was, my daughter raises rabbits. They're right over here. You'll probably hear them every so often, the thumping around, making noise. My dad also raises rabbits. Before I planted anything in these, I put probably 10 gallons of rabbit manure in each of these beds and tilled it all in really thoroughly. That's all I did. So this soil it's highly supplemented with natural rabbit manure. So I'm going to dig in here. I'm going to start pulling some of these bulbs, and I'll give you an example, and you'll see an example of what some of these look like. Alright, so as you'll see here, I've got some green onions here, some bulb onions. I've got a few volunteer tomatoes that have come up from tomato seed that was left over last year, but my problem now is these beets got so large that they're shading out a lot of my onions. And so the beets also have large bulbs on them for the most part, and they need to start coming out so that way I can helpfully fully develop these onions before it's harvest time for them. Let me come over here and start right here. Just grab them and start pulling them. That's a smaller one. I pulled a couple here on the edge a day or two ago, and they were monstrous beets. But anyway, that's kind of what we're looking for. And we save the greens to cook and eat. You can also eat them in salads, or in our case, sometimes we feed them to the rabbits. It all depends. But so we make use of all of this. But I'm gonna start running through here and just start pulling these out. My wife's grandmother likes these small size beets. I don't know if you can see that on camera or not. She likes these small size. Other people I know like them larger, and they just dice them up into quarters whenever they go to pickle them or can them or whatever. I'm also pulling weeds out of here as I go through, so that way I go ahead and kill two birds with one stone here. All different sizes of beet bulbs coming out of here. There's more volunteer tomatoes coming up all down through here as I'm going down these rows, revealing the bottom, the soil. There's still a lot of stuff starting to come up that these beets were actually sheltering, shading out from the sunlight. And what's interesting, if you look, the onions along the edges of the beets are really tall, really large. All these onions down the middle are still really stunted in growth. So I'm probably not going to do this again next year, just because I'm not liking the effects that it has had on my onions. Look at this one. That's a beet. My goodness. Knock that dirt off there. Look at that. Goodness, that's the largest beet I've ever harvested. Alright, so I finished harvesting the first row here, and I'll show you in a minute, but you can see it's really opened up the lighting now. They can come down into, there's a row of lettuce down here that is just starting to come on. It's only about 6 or 7 inches tall. And then there's a whole row of onions down the center of this that are just now starting to grow. So I'd say there's a 99% chance. Just dropped a beet. Dropped the beet. Sorry about that. I just couldn't help it. Anyway, where was I at? There's a 99% chance that I'm not going to do it again this way next year, just because the onions are so important to us. I mean, we plant a couple hundred storage onions every spring because we use them in our homemade spaghetti sauce, in various pickling mixtures that we do, and then we keep them in our encapsulated crawl space all year, all fall, all summer and fall, using them to cook with. So they are very important to us. Beets, they're mildly important, mainly more important to me and my mother-in-law and her mom, or my mama as we call her. So these are more important to us, but the onions are more important to everyone as a whole. So I can't do something like this if it's going to sacrifice the onions, which is something that everyone is wanting and depends on. So this is a great beet harvest, but I'm going to have to figure out a different way to do it next year. Alright, well, here you have it. So this is a large bread tray, I believe is what it was originally, that somebody gave us, and we've repurposed it for various harvests. We've got a bunch of these, and we've got some old like Coke trays, the flats that they transport 6 packs of Cokes and Pepsis and things in, and somebody gave us a bunch of those. So we just use those sort of things for harvesting instead of the baskets, and we take the baskets to market, but we use this sort of stuff. We repurpose all this sort of stuff for the harvest. But this is the beet harvest this year. So this is an extremely thick layer of actually the beets here. You can see the beet, you can see the bulb of the beets here. Throw some of these old leaves off. See, there's a little one that never developed, but the greens are still good. But got a bunch of beets to go through here. I'm gonna go through, clean them all up. I'll probably clean part of these stems off. I'll just go through with a knife and just hack them twice, you know, so I'll have the greens in one hand and the beet bulb itself in another hand. We'll have to clean these up, get them ready to process. And the greens, I got to figure out how many of them I'm going to keep fresh and green for like salad purposes, how many we may cook in the next day or two, and then the rest of them I'm probably going to cook down and then freeze after we've already cooked them. I don't know, I'm going to have to figure out what I'm going to do with all these greens, but there's a whole pile of greens here that I can't see go to waste. Now we'll probably feed several of them to the rabbits, just because, you know, we do feed the rabbits as many greens as we can here from the farm, whether it be out of the food plot, back when I was picking crimson clover and vetch and chicory and all that stuff and feeding to them, or whenever we have our summer plots in, and whenever we have, you know, soybeans and lab and cowpeas and all that sort of stuff, sometimes we'll feed them that too. So just a lot of things we try to feed the rabbits. Anyway, this is the beet harvest this year. We've still got to harvest our onions from the spring, and then the potato harvest won't happen until August. So right now we're still planting more tomato plants, more pepper plants, eggplants, squash, zucchini, the butternut squash. I mentioned squash, but I mean cucumbers, summer squash, butternut squash, acorn squash, spaghetti squash, pumpkins, watermelons. I mean, all that sort of stuff. We're just now starting to plant a lot of that stuff this weekend, and going to have another busy summer, but it's the way we live. It's what we look forward to. And so, you know, a lot of our friends spend all summer out on the lake running around, or at ball games running around, or at the beach. A lot of people, we don't vacation in the summer because it's harvest season. We're here working at least 6 days a week, some days, sometimes 7 days a week, and if we could, we'd do it 8 days a week. So it's what we do to sustain us throughout the rest of the year. It's our lifestyle, and we're very thankful, fortunate, and blessed to have this kind of life. Well, I hope you have enjoyed your Memorial Day weekend. I wish you a safe weekend as well. Spend time with your family, and just stay safe, and God bless.